Welcome back to Wisdom Unveiled. Today, we're diving deep into the nature of reason, reality, and where truth itself comes from. But first, just a quick note as we begin.
What we're doing here is translating some really profound conversations with Iranian philosophers. We're doing our absolute best to capture the heart of these ideas, and we just want to thank you for joining us on this journey, where, some nuance is always going to be part of the translation process.
All right, so if you were with us last time, you'll remember we left off with this really powerful question from the philosopher Al-Farabi. We were exploring his idea that the soul is like a mirror, designed to reflect reality. The cleaner you keep that mirror, right, the clearer the reflection of truth.
But that brings up a huge question, doesn't it? I mean, you can have the most perfectly polished, spotless mirror in the world, but in a pitch-black room, it's totally useless. So if our soul is the mirror, what's the light? Where does the truth it's supposed to reflect actually come from? Al-Farabi has a pretty mind-blowing answer.
So here's our game plan for today. We're going to follow that light right back to its source. Then we'll see how that source connects to a kind of universal mind and what that means for how we even perceive reality. From there, we'll get into the responsibility that comes with this connection, the things that get in our way, and finally, we'll push right up to the very edge of what it's possible to know.
Okay, let's get right into it with our first section. We're going to try and answer that big question. Just what or who is the source of this light?
Farabi gives it a name, the active intellect. Now, try not to think of this as something that's just inside your own head. It's more like a cosmic sun of pure reason, a single, universal source that's always shining. Our individual minds are more like receivers built to tune in and catch that light.
And you have to understand, this was a pretty radical idea at the time. You had Plato, who thought we were born with knowledge, and that learning was just a process of remembering it from a past life. Then you had Aristotle, who argued that basic truths were just self-evident, kind of built into our operating system. But Farabi comes along and says, nope, it's neither of those. He calls it illumination. We don't just remember truth or find it inside us. We have to actively connect to an outside source to receive it.
Now, Farabi doesn't just stop with the human mind. In our second section, we're going to see how this idea of an active intellect expands from something personal to a force that shapes the entire cosmos. For Farabi, this active intellect is basically the intelligence that holds the universe together. It's the logic behind everything, from the way the planets move in their orbits to the instincts that guide animals. It's the order that's woven into the fabric of reality itself. And this is where Farabi does something I find absolutely fascinating. He starts bridging the gap between philosophy and theology. He identifies this active intellect with figures from religious texts, like the angel Gabriel or the Holy Spirit. For him, there was no conflict. The source of rational truth and the source of divine revelation were one and the same. You can almost see what he means when you look at nature. I mean, how does a bee just know how to build a geometrically perfect hexagon? Farabi would say it's not learning a skill. It's a direct, instinctual tap into this universal intelligence. The only difference is that we humans, he thought, just have a much higher bandwidth connection.
So, if we're all connected to this thing, what does that actually mean for how we live and see the world? That brings us to Section 3, where things get really profound.
This leads to a really mind-bending idea, something that's been called a metaphysics of presence. Here's the gist. When you perceive, say, a tree, you aren't just a camera, passively recording data about it. Because your mind is connected to the active intellect, and the active intellect is present in the tree, your active seeing is a kind of participation. For a moment, you become present with the tree.
I mean, just let that sink in. This is over a millennium before many modern philosophers in the West started exploring similar ideas. Farabi was arguing that being conscious isn't a spectator sport. To know the world is to be deeply, fundamentally woven into it.
Okay, but this powerful connection to reality, it's not just a cool feature. It comes with a massive obligation. So in our fourth section, let's explore what this deep presence actually demands from us. Farabi makes a really crucial turn toward ethics here. He says, look, if the intellect's job is to connect us to truth, then its most important function isn't just solving math problems, it's telling the difference between good and evil. And the second you have that ability, well, you're on the hook. You're accountable for your choices. Your intellect isn't just for knowing, it's for being responsible.
But that raises a pretty big question, doesn't it? If our intellect is naturally connected to truth and goodness, why do we mess up so often? Why don't we see things clearly? In our fifth section, we're going to look at the roadblocks.
And this is where we loop right back to our mirror metaphor from last time. Remember how we talked about tarnish, like desires and ego smudging the surface of the soul's mirror? Well, Farabi now uses a different word for the same idea, veils. He pictures our biases and attachments as actual veils that cover our intellect and block out the light of truth.
And of course, if the problem is basically the same, so is the solution. Before, the job was to polish the mirror. Now the job is purification, which is really the same thing, the constant spiritual and ethical work of lifting those veils, clearing our vision so that the light can finally shine through unimpeded.
We've now come to our final section, and honestly, this is where Farabi lands on his most profound and maybe his most humbling conclusion about what it even means to know something.
After this entire journey, after seeking the light and trying to clear the veils, Farabi hits us with this incredible paradox. He says the ultimate achievement of the human intellect isn't to finally understand everything. The highest form of knowledge is to finally understand your own limits, to see the boundary of what can be known.
And here it is, in his own stunning words. The ultimate vision is the vision that there is no path to it. What he's saying is that the final destination for reason is to see, with perfect clarity, the point beyond which reason itself cannot travel.
There's a beautiful metaphor that helps explain this. Imagine your finite mind is like a small clay cup. Sure, it can hold some water, it can contain some knowledge, but it can never ever contain the entire ocean. For the water inside the cup to become one with the ocean, the cup itself, our separate, limited sense of self, has to break.
And that's the final, challenging thought that Farabi leaves us with, a question that's as relevant today as it was 1,000 years ago. If the highest wisdom is understanding our limits, what cup in your own thinking, what rigid belief, what certainty you're clinging to might need to break for you to see a much, much greater reality?